It's usually never ideal to go from being number one to number two, but I think in this circumstance, it may play out in BYU's favor. Let's dig into it.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And as always, thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Head over to FanDuel.com to get started today. All right, coming up on today's show, we're going to talk about AJ Dybantsa being downgraded. I don't think it's necessarily that, but we'll dig into that. We'll also talk about how a fellow member of the top tier prospects list from the 2026 cycle might be interested in reclassifying and joining AJ at BYU. We'll let you know who Tyran Stokes is, and then we'll finish up today's show with our weekly, it's not been weekly, but we'll get to a Locked On Cougars Insider Group Q&A session. We'll get to the questions that were submitted to us for the show. So without further ado, let's delve right in. Now, you may have seen the news yesterday that Kansas signee Darryn Peterson is going to be the top-rated prospect in the 2025 recruiting class. For months, AJ Dybantsa has been rated 100, aka a perfect prospect, according to 24/7 Sports, and that's where this is coming from. They have had him as the top prospect in the 2025 cycle. And AJ originally was actually a member of the 2026 cycle and reclassified into 2025, if you recall. Well, Darryn Peterson's kind of been nipping at his heels all of this, we call it recruiting cycle long. And there's been talk that he could surpass AJ Dybantsa. And it was always kind of wondering, okay, what's going to happen here? Is Darryn Peterson going to surpass him? Well, 24/7 Sports put the story out yesterday and decided that's exactly what they're going to do. So they said this: after watching a number of different games, they decided that Peterson was going to be their top-rated prospect. And they said the number one ranking is not based on who had the best senior season. It is based on the prospect we believe has the best long-term future, unquote. This comes from the 24/7 Sports story. Great. You believe that Darryn Peterson is the better prospect? We're talking long-term, and I'm talking NBA. Great. You can believe that all you want. I'm going to be biased and say that AJ Dybantsa has got the size and the athleticism and the shot-making ability that I believe set him apart. And the other part about it is he's a willing facilitator, and even more so, plays defense. I'm not saying that Darryn Peterson can't do those things, but Darryn Peterson, to me, he is a guy that is really proven to be a elite athlete who is a bucket getter, but great. You want to go with a 6'5", 195-pound guard over a 6'9", 220-pound do everything player? Hey, go right on ahead. They do say this: Peterson is in the best shape of his life, and he's playing with more explosiveness than ever because of it. He's getting downhill to attack the paint more, rising up emphatically at the rim, and proving to be equally impactful on the defensive end with his playmaking and positional versatility. Put it all together, and you have an incredibly versatile guard who can score, make plays, and change the game in other numerous ways. Most of all, though, you have an elite natural talent who's clearly committed to maximizing his potential and consequently ascending at the most rapid rate. And that is why Peterson will finish as the number one rated prospect in the class of 2025. If I am in AJ Dybantsa's camp, I would be saying, go right on ahead. We're going to see Darryn Peterson once, twice, hey, maybe even 3 times when we square off in the Big 12. If the Big 12 knows what's good for him, BYU and Kansas will stop doing this one-off every season in this upcoming season. You get Darryn Peterson and AJ Dybantsa on the court together and let them go head-to-head in those Kansas versus BYU matchups. And if I'm AJ Dybantsa, they want to think that Darryn Peterson's got longer-term potential. He's more athletic. He is a better player overall. You believe all that. I'm going to go out there and prove you wrong. That is what AJ Dybantsa's mindset has to be. And everything I've seen from AJ Dybantsa indicates that, yes, he may not be a man of many words. He is not very eloquent, and I don't mean that in a bad way. When it comes to media interviews, he just doesn't want to say a lot. He's not that type of a guy. He prefers to let his play do the talking for him. That is the perfect answer to this. And if he does take it as a slight, I don't know if he does. I don't have any inroads and any in with the AJ Dybantsa camp. But I think the bigger point is, great, you can pick Darryn Peterson, but I think AJ Dybantsa, he will stomach that. He'll use it as fuel to his fire, and he will go out there and unleash it when BYU and Kansas get together, and even more so with his overall play this upcoming season for the BYU Cougars. The mock drafts for 2026, there's not Darryn Peterson as the number one player in that mock draft. It's AJ Dybantsa. So good on you, 24/7 Sports. I appreciate the fact that you're adding fuel to the fire here for BYU and AJ as he comes in to be one of the premier guys, probably the premier guy in the BYU basketball program. He is going to have just a massive spotlight cast on him. And going to Kansas for a guy like Darryn Peterson, that spotlight is already there, obviously, because it's the vaunted Kansas Jayhawks. But remind me, the last 2 years, how's Kansas done against BYU? Oh, wait, 0-2. I'll just leave that there. The other thing about this is there are people out there crowing that AJ's in a free fall, dropping from number 1 to number 2. Okay, let's reiterate one thing. AJ Dybantsa's ranking did not drop anything past 100. Darryn Peterson just so happens to also be ranked 100. They believe these two players are perfect prospects. Great. Go right on ahead and do that. Once again, I think we will see AJ prove it on the court. And heck, if Darryn Peterson gets one over on him, so be it. I think this is going to set up a pretty elite rivalry, even if it lasts just 6-ish months next year in the basketball season between Kansas and BYU and these two premier players. You know they're uber athletic and uber talented on the basketball court. I cannot wait to see them go at it. And I think this is going to set up some storylines for some really, really fun contests. We know that BYU is going to play in a lot of premier events. We learned yesterday they're going to play in the Jimmy V Classic out at Madison Square Garden in, I think it's early December, it's like December 9th or 10th, if I recall correctly. They're already going to open the season against Villanova in Las Vegas. They're going to play in a made-for-TV MTE event ESPN's putting on that should have multiple ranked matchups in it. BYU is going to have a lot of high-profile games, but this right here with Darryn Peterson surpassing AJ Dybantsa, I think it's going to set up some made-for-TV Big 12 matchups that already would exist, but even more so because you have the two premier talents in all of college basketball, and they're going to go head-to-head on the hardwoods. Let's do this thing. Let's put it in prime time, and let's see who comes out on top. And I, for one, plan to be watching all of it as close as I possibly can. Obviously, being at home games as a credentialed media member. And heck, this may be the first year I venture out on the road as a college basketball reporter. Okay, that's maybe a little too hasty. I do have a wife and kids, but you get the point. It is going to be a really, really fun basketball season ahead. And I hope this had some fuel and a fire to the belly of AJ Dybantsa. I hope he kind of eats it up and says, all right, you believe that now? We'll shut you up when we actually hit the hardwoods coming up in November. All right, coming up next, could there be another premier talent interested in coming to BYU? And could this talent elevate BYU to maybe number 1 in the preseason polls? Is that big of a prospect? Who is Tyran Stokes? We're digging into him next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, FanDuel is here for you guys with the NBA playoffs almost here. They are giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel, you place your first $5 bet, you get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. It's really simple and easy to use. The website's super easy to use. The app is even smoother if you want to do it mobilely. The best part is you can pick your favorite team. You can dive into player props, three-pointer, steals, assists. FanDuel has many different ways for you to get in on the action with player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win even bigger payouts from our friends over at FanDuel. So don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com today and claim your $250 in bonus bets right away. That's FanDuel.com, or check them out on the FanDuel app right now at FanDuel.com. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you're doing well on this Thursday. By the way, it's been some glorious weather here along the Wasatch Front. It's finally spring. I've broken out the golf clubs. If you guys want to hit the links, hit me up. I'm always game if I have time to go out and play around. But the bigger point you made here is it is springtime, and this is when college basketball prospects really emerge on the AAU/EYBL circuit. And this is an interesting time for those prospects because typically this is when they make their names for themselves with scouts, with talent evaluators, both at the college and NBA levels. And one premier prospect is opting out of all that. You may have seen this yesterday. Tyran Stokes, who plays for Notre Dame Prep Academy, I believe is what it's called, in Sherman Oaks, California. The report came out that he's skipping out on AAU, Nike EYBL. He is not going to play the summer circuit of basketball. Well, why would he do that? Well, it has fueled major speculation that he is considering, like AJ Dybantsa did many, many moons ago. He did almost a year ago, I think, at this point. He may be considering reclassifying into the 2025 recruiting cycle. And what's the connection to BYU, Jake? Good thing you asked. Well, he and AJ Dybantsa once upon a time were prep teammates. Yes, that right there could be a hook to help BYU to get a talent like Tyran Stokes on campus at BYU. Tyran Stokes is the number 1 rated prospect in the 2026 cycle right now. He's rated 99 by 24/7 Sports, 5-star prospect of the highest order. His composite rating is 99.99, so he is just a shade out of being that perfect prospect like AJ is. And at 6'7", 245 pounds, he is a combo forward who could be the perfect complement to a guy like AJ Dybantsa and Richie Saunders in the BYU lineup. He's got the size, as I mentioned, at 245 pounds. He is not a rail thin prospect who needs time to develop in the weight room. He's already got a college-ready body, and that may be part of the reason why he's saying, you know what? Maybe I just want to jump in now and see what I can do. And I'll just say this. If BYU has any inclination of seeing themselves make a Final Four, make a run at a national championship, if Tyran Stokes is truly intent on reclassifying into this recruiting cycle, you go all in on this guy. We have heard from BYU boosters, is it Dan Lillianquist? I know the last name is Lillianquist. He said, we will not be outbid if Tyran Stokes does indeed reclassify and BYU be a part of a pack of dozens, if not hundreds of schools who would chase this kid if he does enter the 2025 cycle. But if BYU really has the infinite amount of funds, NIL-wise, to attract talent, Tyran Stokes is the guy to match up with AJ Dybantsa. And I'm not going to mince words. Get him to BYU. Now, let me also add this. I know he's playing high school basketball in California currently, but he is a native of Louisville, Kentucky. And there's a big thought that he may want to go back to his hometown and put on for the Louisville Cardinals. Hey, I get that. A lot of us would want to do that for our hometown as well, want to put on for our hometown squad. But I think AJ Dybantsa, what Kevin Young is building at BYU, proving that he can send guys to the NBA, because Jaeger Demon just declared for the NBA draft, and AJ Dybantsa is still the number 1 rated prospect in the 2026 NBA draft mock drafts that are out there. You can make a major push for a guy like Tyran Stokes, and he'd be foolish not to consider it because, as I mentioned, he's a former prep teammate of AJ Dybantsa. He's got a relationship with AJ, and AJ can tell him, hey, this is what BYU is all about. And we've already seen that AJ, he is putting on for BYU at an extremely high level. This is a kid who is sporting BYU gear everywhere. He's on national TV shows. He's going to these different high school all-star events. And all he does is speak effusively about what BYU is about, what he hopes to accomplish, how he's embracing everything that BYU stands for. It's an absolute gold mine marketing-wise for BYU. And to elevate the play on the court, a guy like Tyran Stokes alongside AJ, and like I said, a guy like Richie Saunders, that's the trio that could really take BYU to some unprecedented heights. I think as it stands right now, without Tyran Stokes, BYU at worst is probably a top 15 preseason team. I think that's the very worst. They're more likely to be a preseason top 10. That's the type of talent that AJ Dybantsa and the fame that he brings to BYU, that'll elevate them to that status. You get Tyran Stokes on board, they're top 5 at worst, and heck, they may be pushing for the number 1 spot in the preseason poll if he does do this. Once again, let me reiterate and be very clear. This is speculation. We do not know that Tyran Stokes is going to reclassify, but him skipping out on the summer circuit where really you do make hay when it comes to being a prospect of that magnitude, it's very curious that he would opt out on that. And that is why if If he comes on the market, BYU needs to throw whatever amount of money the offer needs to be to get him to BYU. Give him an offer that he can't refuse. I'm quoting The Godfather there. This would be one of those talents. If you pair with AJ Dybantsa, yeah, they're going to be very, very young. They're going to be much like Duke this past year, where they're going to be playing freshmen who are top-tier prospects. And there's obviously concerns because there are people out there saying that for the first time ever, a freshman did not play in the national championship this year. Yeah, experience does win at a high level in college basketball. But Duke came one inbound away from blowing that whole notion and that whole storyline up. BYU and Kevin Young have proven that they can steer top-tier talent in a positive direction. And in the case of what Jaeger Demon's doing, get them to the NBA after 1 year, but also accomplish really, really nice things along the way, obviously making a run into the Sweet 16 this year. AJ Dybantsa, Tyran Stokes, and then having a guy like Richie Saunders as a Big 12 all Big 12 first-team honoree, I'm telling you, that has got the core of what could be the floor at the very worst of Sweet 16, and more likely the expectation is the Final Four, if not a national championship game appearance. That is the type of talent that Tyran Stokes can bring to BYU to pair alongside AJ Dybantsa. So if, I'll reiterate that, if there's any opportunity to get Tyran Stokes to BYU to team up with Kevin Young and company, make it happen, Cougars. Put that money where your mouth is and, hey, flex that prowess. And let me also reiterate one more time. I get that it kind of feels in a way dirty, and I get all that, but this is the new era of college basketball. Do not let opposing fan bases, Baylor, Utah State, who want to rip BYU for playing by the rules. Great. If that's what BYU has to wear, that they are the power that, played by the rules for years and is now finally playing by these other rules, and suddenly people want to rip them coming and going, go for it. BYU needs to embrace who they are and understand people are always going to hate on the Cougars. Any of you who are older than I am, I'm almost 40 now. I've watched part of the WAC era. I've watched the Mountain West era, and BYU, they were loathed in those eras. They were loathed for stretches of their West Coast Conference tenure and also during their independent run. Well, we may be just getting going here in the Big 12, and this is just kind of the lot that BYU gets. Like I said, they get ripped coming and going, but they play by the rules. And the rules are written the way they are right now, and money talks. Go out and get it, and get a guy like Tyran Stokes, and just to, not pun not intended, stoke the fire just a little bit more and really bug some more people along the way. We'll see how it all goes, but that Tyran Stokes, he is absolutely worth it. If BYU wants to be a top-tier program, if you can get him, go get him. All right, coming up next, we'll finish up today's show with questions that were submitted via our Locked On Cougars Insider Group. A lot of good ones on college basketball, BYU's place in the pantheon of college hoops, some college football talk. We'll get to all that next as you roll on right here on Locked On Cougars. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Just another reminder for you guys, I mentioned a couple of times already today, join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group, get the inside scoop on all things BYU sports that I'm hearing coming to your phone in the form of a text message. It does not get much more direct than that. You don't have to log on to a website, go to a message board. It comes to your phone in the form of a text message. The best part is you can fire back with thoughts yourself, and we can have one-on-one conversations. The best part is just $4.99. $5 a month to be a part of it. And the kicker is you get a 14-day free trial, 2 full weeks before you're charged a single dime for the insider intel that you crave. Join us today on the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right, we'll start off today. This is more commentary, as Josh acknowledges, but he says this: what a time to be a BYU fan. The last time I was this excited at seeing both basketball and football do well would be from 2008 to 2011 during the Max Hall and Jimmer Fredette combo. And I think right now clears that time by a huge margin. The best part is it only looks like it's going to get better from here. Josh makes a very good point there. There were some really high heights in that kind of late 20-aughts, early 20-teens. BYU was a really, really good team, but here's the deal. They're now in the Big 12. They're competing on a higher level than they ever were at the Mountain West era. That's what that era was. That I'm with Josh. I think they've surpassed that. Now, he also adds this. I think it would be fitting when Tom Homo retires, which is going to happen later this year, they unveil Tom Homo Field at Lavelle Edwards Stadium. I think there's few, if any other athletic director in BYU history has done more to advance the exposure and reach of BYU athletics than he has. So there's an argument for it. I know that Tom would be reticent to do that because he played for Lavelle. He reveres Lavelle Edwards, as we all do, because Lavelle is the legend himself. He's the GOAT. I just don't think Tom would go for it. And I don't see BYU renaming the field. I think, honestly, the naming of the field, isn't it currently like Pax Field or whatever? Because that's what they have out there on the sponsorship side of things. I just think that's the one thing to monitor there. All right, other questions coming in here. What happened with the Georgia basketball player in the portal that was supposed to visit? That comes from Greg, and that was Damari Jr., Silas Damari Jr. Greg, he committed to UConn. Now, things can change, but obviously he committed to UConn, and that's just kind of the deal when it comes to the situation with the transfer portal. Is it comes and goes very quickly. I still, at this juncture, I'll just add this. I am fully expecting Rob Wright to be a BYU Cougar, being a Robert Wright III out of Baylor. I think it's all but done, and we'll see what ultimately the decision is when he announces it. But I really do think that BYU is going to get a really, really high-level player in Rob Wright coming in. Interesting comment here coming in. What position excuse me, it's the football. We're going to get to football in just a minute. Now, he says this, Ken, so not really an question, but an observation. Let's say Jaeger goes in the top 10, and next year AJ Dybantsa obviously goes number 1, and let's say Richie goes in the top 15. How many people do you think will start flocking and wanting to come to BYU? A lot. I'll just say that, Ken. Now, I will say this. I don't see Richie going in the first round. Age, overall skill set, I think he's a second-round pick in the NBA draft at best. And that's I'm not trying to rip Richie. I love Richie as a player. He's one of my favorite players on this team. And I just think that he's probably a second-round pick. But to your point, if Jaeger does go top 10, top 15 this year, AJ Dybantsa goes number 1 next year. Let's say if Tyran Stokes does reclassify, he's probably a top 10 pick at worst in his own right. BYU suddenly would truly be that NBA factory. And Kevin Young, all he's got to do is start saying, guys, look at what I'm doing over here, when he's recruiting other guys, saying, I put that guy in the NBA, I put this guy in the NBA, and suddenly parents and athletes are like, you know what? I can put up with what BYU is all about. That's the thing about this. So that, I think that's the point to make there. Now, from Kent to Kent. Now, this goes to Kent Turner. I would assume the answer is probably not, but any concerns about losing any critical basketball coaches after the strong season? I don't think so at this juncture, Kent, but I don't think you can rule it out. It's a wild ride when it comes to assistant basketball coaches. They come and go very often. I am interested to see what Kevin Young does, because he obviously filled out his full complement of coaches, and quite honestly, they were very, very good. He's got great coaches working around him, but I think that he is going to be reticent to change it unless one of them leaves of their own volition. Does that make sense? If they leave, then he will replace them. But yeah, I don't see any reason why Kevin Young's looking to kick anybody out at this point. John Tucker, 2 burning questions for me. Number 1, what's the latest intel on the AD job? Kind of mum's the word in many respects. I just haven't heard a lot. I know that BYU is going through a pretty thorough process, as often they do. I've talked about this when it comes to the basketball search for Kevin Young last year. You go all the way back to the Kalani Sitake hire. BYU takes a while to get through the various people that want to have a say in this. Now, the athletic director is a little different because, it's the athletic director who's typically doing the hiring of a coach, but you still have to talk with university president, the advancement vice president, and that's at the university level. Then BYU traditionally has high-profile jobs like this. They have to interview with a member of the Quorum of the 12 or the First Presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Then they have to have the Board of Trustees, which that comprises the vast majority of the Big 12, if not all of it, as well as the First Presidency, for final approval of said hire. It goes through multiple layers, multiple interviews, and it can take some time. I just don't know a ton about where it stands right now. I also asked this, maybe another show. I'd like to know more about Lee Cummard and what he plans to do with the women's basketball program. That is for another show, John. It's a great question. I may try and get Lee on this show because it's women's basketball. They crave some extra intel, and Lee's a good dude. I might have to see if I can get him on the show to talk about that. Donovan, if Richie Saunders returns and plays alongside AJ Dybantsa, Keba Keita, and Robert Wright the third, do you think we can make it to the Final Four next year? I would hope so. And like I said, if Tyran Stokes come in, Yeah, I think the expectation would be a Final Four. Now, so it's a one and done situation. You have to be very, very on point throughout that entire run to make such a run. But BYU will have the opportunities to do that, and I think that's the fun part about this. Sam, this is a good question here, more of a comment. Quote, as the transfer portal increasingly becomes a free agent market and NIL collectives grow more aggressive with upfront offers, how is BYU adjusting its recruitment pipeline, both in football and basketball, to attract and retain top-tier talent without compromising on the university's honor code and institutional identity? Okay, there's a second part to this question. Let me say this. Kalani Sitake and Kevin Young, they espouse what BYU is all about. Now, individual kids, they may hear that and let it go out one side of go in one ear and go out the other, but they're not going in and trying to cover up what BYU is all about. That was a hallmark of the Gary Croton era, is he would say, oh, this honor code thing, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. No, Kalani Sitake and Kevin Young, they're pretty explicit in saying, this is what BYU is all about. It is a religiously affiliated university. And yes, they have an honor code. And yes, you have to live up to it. Now, according to one Baylor poster, if you saw it on social media yesterday, they believe that Robert Wright III has to give up premarital sex, caffeine, and Arby's for the money. Well, 2 of the 3 are okay, but yeah, that made me chuckle. Second part, are you seeing evidence that BYU's internal stakeholders, the athletic department, administration, donors, collective organizers, are aligned on a sustainable NIL framework? And how does this impact the long-term development of players who buy into the program versus those who might view BYU as a short-term platform before jumping to a more lucrative opportunity? So the first part there, evidence that the stakeholders are all in on this. Yeah, they are, because I don't know if should I be saying this. The Royal Blue Collective, which has been out there, it's the official university endorsed collective. It's moving in-house. BYU now is running it, or will be running it shortly. I don't know if I'm breaking news or if I'm breaking protocol by saying that, but that's what's happening. BYU is bringing it in-house, and they're going to run it on their terms. So yeah, they have a sustainable NIL framework, and the donors out there, they're all aligned. They've got dozens upon dozens, and we're talking deep-pocketed boosters. We're talking guys who have hundreds of millions, if not billions, in the bank. And yes, I know guys like Ryan Smith are the poster child for that. Ryan's just one guy in a sea of others. BYU's got a major booster pool to work with, and a lot of them are willing to put up a lot of money. And then the final question here, how does this impact the long-term development of players? Here's the deal. It's a transactional world anymore. And I know that sounds bad. You want to talk about program guys who want to come in and put the time in and be the 4-year guy. Those are going to be guys. They're going to be the exception now. I hate to break it to you, Sam, but that era of college basketball feels like it's kind of gone by the wayside. And BYU, there's going to be a lot of guys coming through. It's going to be a short-term platform. We just saw it with Jaeger Demon. It's going to be that way for AJ Dybantsa. It'll be that way for a guy like Tyran Stokes if he picks BYU. There might be the one odd guy who's a BYU lifer and is an elite talent that comes in and, yeah, wants to play for BYU for multiple years. That's the exception rather than the rule now. And, yeah, I know that you're trying to balance the two, but it's just not – it's not that way right now. It's so transactional, and that's just a simple fact of life right now. All right. Other questions. Let's get some football ones in real quick. I'm almost out of time here. Let's do. Okay. Good one from Jackson here. Do we have a quarterback for next year after Jake Retzloff's last season? Yes. BYU actually has multiple quarterbacks. They are in the mix there. I would say right now the favorite. I don't have any inside intel on this. This is purely speculation on my part. So Jake Hatch speaking here, not for anybody else. McKay Hillstead. Former Utah State signee, a guy from Skyridge High School. He is not the biggest quarterback, but he is an elite talent. He's got a good arm. He's got elite speed. He's not the biggest guy out there, as I mentioned, but he has got playmaker written all over him. And at this juncture, he is my odds-on favorite to be BYU starting quarterback next year. Now, should BYU see something that worries them, there's a transfer portal. Obviously, they could go and hit after this upcoming season. But right now, I'd say McKay Hillstead is the odds-on favorite to be the guy to replace Jake next year. What are you most looking forward to in BYU's upcoming football season from Oliver? I love football. That's the number one thing. I love watching BYU play. BYU football is my pride and joy. I don't think I hide that on this podcast. It's what I grew up was number one. It still is number one on my list in terms of my favorite sports at BYU. Basketball is a close second, especially the way that BYU basketball is trending right now. But the biggest thing for BYU this year in football is, can they follow up what they did last year? 11-2. What a remarkable season it was. Quite frankly, it's one of the top 5 seasons in BYU football history, I think. Hey, maybe we should do that. Maybe we should rank like the all 100, because it was the 100th season of BYU football last year. Maybe I'll get to work on that. Maybe we can rank all 100 seasons. I can tell you this much. The 100th season, the worst season all time for BYU, is the only losing season the 0-for season they had. It was in the 1950s. I think they didn't win a single game. It's only happened once in BYU football history. And when you go 0-for, yeah, you're probably going to be dead last. And, the national championship season, an unblemished record in 1984, that's probably number one. But we got 98 other seasons between that. We could have some fun with that. Let me consider what we could do with that. But yeah, the biggest thing for me, Oliver, is I'm just excited to get to football season. It's fun to watch BYU play, and I want to see how they follow up next year. All right, we got a lot of good questions here. Maybe we'll hold these over till tomorrow. I got plenty of time. We got another podcast tomorrow on Friday. We'll get to as many of them as we can tomorrow as well. We are over time. We've trying to keep this around 30 minutes. So as always, thank you for your guys' support of the podcast. Hopefully the information I'm passing along is of use to you guys. I say this a lot, and I probably should reiterate it more. My goal here is to make you the smartest BYU fan you can be, and I'm your secret weapon. But at the same time, subscribe, rate, review, share it with your family and friends. Let them know all about what we're doing over here on Locked On Cougars. But as always, once again, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And as always, thank you for being an everydayer right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.